Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's super exciting to be doing this. Regenerosity started as a partnership between Lush Spring Prize and Buckminster Fuller Institute and the Equator Prize, but it was really incubated in the GRC, which is the Global Regeneration Collab. And part of the work that we've been doing is really doing this from a place of sharing learnings, of developing together, of resourcing each other. And we thought we owe to the network to also be accountable to what we're doing, be held accountable for what we're doing, and be in dialogue with our larger network. So today, that's the aim of our session together, is to share what we've been doing with what we call our Regenerative Capacity Development Program, and use this opportunity to get mirrors and get questions and be resourced by our community. So yeah, and we thought that the best way to start, because our main role is really to be in service of grassroots organizations that are protecting and regenerating land and community, we thought it would be great to start by hearing some of our grassroots partners talking about their projects and their partnerships with us. Knowing that they are holding the wealth and they're holding the spirit of regenerosity. So yeah, that's what we're going to do next. Oh, sorry, I forgot to do one thing. I was I was going to do a little check-in in the chat. I got too excited about listening to our partners. I've been doing a lot of talks about climate change and trying to get people excited about doing this work. And I think we're listening to a lot of doom and gloom, and a lot of, even also when you're doing work with grassroots organizations, if you're working in philanthropy or in grant making, or you're working with the grassroots, like, it's really harrowing, everything that's coming and the stories that come, and witnessing all the pain that is happening in the world. But I always say that it's the connection to the things that we love that keeps us grounded in this work and keep us motivated to do this work. And we see grassroots organizations so important to help life on Earth to go through the changes of the next decades. So as a little check-in, I wanted you to write something in the chat that you love, and that is the thing that you want to hold close to. And as I say with my team, it's like the things that you want to be in kinship with, the human or the more than human that you want to develop this relationality with, in order to hold each other tight as we go over the next decades. That are not going to be easy, as we know. So yeah, just put it in the chat. What is the love story in your life that motivates you to do this work? Like for me, it's the love for the oceans, the love for mushrooms. It's the love for the more than human, for sure, that keeps me grounded doing this work. So yeah, please write in the chat the driving force of love in your life as you do this work.
As you're taking a moment to reflect and to write in the chat box these things that are grounded in love for you, the things that give us service, let's start to hear from some of our partners. We have 3 fantastic voices, and we'll begin in a moment with the voice of Peruth, who joins us from Uganda, from Ramwanja Rural Foundation. And Peruth is a permaculture teacher and a mushroom farmer. And Peruth, and after her, we'll hear from Aparna and Kamal joining from Earth Forever from India. But these, like Ruth said, are to help us ground in the work. So we really wanted to center this space on the voices of those who are doing this amazing work on the ground. So let's hear from Peruth to begin with.
Hey everyone, I'm Mutes Perus, a trainer of mushrooms and permaculture from Ramanjaro Foundation Limited, Uganda. Ramanjaro Foundation is a refugee-led organization which is founded and led by refugees with a mission to uplift refugee standards through regenerative agriculture in composting, permaculture trainings, mushroom training, mushroom value addition trainings, and vocational trainings to empower youth and women. Well, through Regenerosity, Connection, and Trip, I've learned more about regenerative practices through other practitioners. They also learned from me as I learned from them, mostly in regenerative agriculture. I also got more connections during the trip. I met Tina, I met James, Juliet, Faith, and Emily, who is my mentor in terms of mushrooms, value addition, and production. And being part of Regenerosity's network is very important to me and the community around me. And I really appreciate how Regenerosity does its work, especially when it comes to peer learning and through its connection. This is one way of learning from others, and it's part of gaining new skills and sharing my skills with more people. So I really appreciate Regenerosity's connection. It was an amazing place to be, and I really still wish to continue with Regenerosity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to Peruth, who I actually just saw enter this call. So if you have any questions for Peruth, maybe you can pop them in the chat box. And thanks so much, Peruth. And also I see Ben Mariki from Ramanja Rural Foundation is here too. Next, let's hear from Aparna and Kumal from Earth Forever in India, who are creating food forests with rural farmers. So let's hear from them.
Hello. It's so wonderful to have this opportunity to share our work through Regenerosity with all of you amazing people. We're Earth Forever. We work in an ecologically sensitive region of Western Maharashtra with marginal and indigenous farmers, mainly women. Our aim is really to shift the mindset of the farmers, to reignite a regenerative thinking within them, because somewhere the communities that we work with, somewhere deep within them, they are very connected to the forest. We aim to do this by establishing permaculture demonstration sites, both kitchen gardens and food forests, along with the members of the community. We seriously hope to demonstrate to them that working with nature, mimicking the forest can be very productive and transformative on many levels, not only food security. Only when they experience this themselves will they really adopt these regenerative practices. We work in partnership with a grassroots organization led by some really driven women of the community. Their organization is called Sukhbhumi India, and their demonstration sites are really shining examples of what is possible in a very small space of land. They're truly the regenerative pioneers of that region. And we're training them to be trainers so they can share these regenerative principles and practices in their own language, backed by their own experience with conviction.
For us, Regenerosity's mission is to enable grassroots organizations to spread the regenerative movement. The best part is they do this not just by procuring funding, but by actually co-designing the projects and providing a platform where organizations can share their experiences and support each other. They work in a very hands-on, personal way, where they are with us every step of the way. For an organization like ours, this participative approach has been invaluable. At Earth Forever, we are always encouraging our partners to bring up the challenges they are facing on ground, not just their achievements, because that's the only way we believe we can actually learn and grow together. And with Regenerosity, it's so good for us to be at the receiving end of the same philosophy, to know that there is a safe and a supportive space where we can discuss our ideas and our challenges with all honesty and transparency, knowing that we will be heard. It's really important to have that. Often in the rush to achieve deadlines and produce results, one forgets to pause and take a step back to assess what is really required to achieve the goals of the project. and the peer learning circles provided exactly that perspective. Being able to be a part of the circles compelled us to step back and constantly assess our processes. Sharing in the diverse circles gave us a much better perspective of our own project. More importantly, when you're so immersed and caught up with your work, you don't connect with anyone else. It becomes a very lonely process. Through the peer learning circles, we connect with others who were doing different kinds of projects in different parts of the country. And we realized that though we were all in such different geographical locations, the challenges we faced largely remained the same. Just knowing that and seeing the good work everyone else is doing was hugely motivating for us. Being able to pat each other on the back, appreciate each other's work, gave us the much needed encouragement that we required.
Thank you. Well, Aparna and Kamal couldn't be here because it's quite late for them today, but, Baruth and Bemerik are here, as James said, if we have any other questions that we want to ask them. We wanted to start with the voices of our partners because I think what they said speaks a lot to why we started Regenerosity. And I think first is the idea that communities are really key to protecting and regenerating threatened or degraded landscapes, but also they have the connections, the wealth and the knowledge to be doing this work. But it can be very lonely. And this is something that decades of funding grassroots organizations that we had before Regenerosity, in my case at Lush, the connectivity and the platforming and the opportunity to stop, to reflect, to share from each other is really important, especially for emerging organizations. So we have many established networks of grassroots organizations. But if we want to increase, we need millions of those organizations, hundreds of thousands. And how are we supporting their connectivity and their growth and their emergence unless we're creating those spaces? So how can we move just beyond funding and actually create those spaces for reflection, from learning, for exchanges? And that's what we tried to do at Regenerosity. And also this belief that if we're able to flow resources that come from a place of trust, a place of relationships, a place of solidarity, then we can really amplify this movement together. So that's what was at the source of Regenerosity. And you can see our vision on the screen. And then, of course, as our partners said, we do this by giving funds, but also sitting together, co-designing, sitting in peer learning circles, etc., so we can grow their capacities, their scale, and their impact. Faith, you can go to the next one. And this is a summary of everything that we've just said. So we work at these three levels: at place-based, through these community-centered programs, strengthening capacity and capacity sharing and strengthening. So we really believe in the peer learning, not having global north people telling the communities what to do. This doesn't make any sense. So it's, as Baruth said, it's permaculture and regenerative practitioners are sharing with each other their similarities, their differences, their techniques, etc., and really creating that thriving exchange of the people that are doing similar work. So yeah, they connect, they share their stories, they collaborate. We're also we want to do better next time is how do we support connection to the wider audiences? So the people here, maybe you have useful connections for them. We were able to do it for some of the projects, but I think we can do that even more. And then finally, how through storytelling, so we recorded videos, we are on social platforms, how can we amplify their stories and connect them into other funders, other projects, etc., to help build the regenerative movement? And finally, we're engaging funders as well to think in more trust-based ways and applying these ideas of regenerative philanthropy to their funding practices. And Regenerosity, we're not a foundation, so we rely on donations and we rely on fundraising in order to be able to do this work. And just remember, later on, you're going to be able to ask us lots of questions and help us improve what we're doing. Faith?
Thanks, Ruth. So we have a pretty diverse team spanned across 6 different countries. You've just heard from James and Ruth, who are both based in the UK. We have team members based in Brazil, East Africa, India, and in the US. And we're all really dedicated to the work that we're doing here. Most of us have been with Regenerosity for nearly 4 years, and this is a passion project for a lot of us. We work on this every day, some of us, and really believe in this work. So we just wanted to share who we are. Also, our programs are really based on each one of these core pillars of our theory of change. So we have 4 different programs that we run. Hold on one second. I realize that Ruth is, I'm also the tech person on this call, so trying to do both.
Oh, good. I'm letting people in, Faith.
Okay, great. So we have 4 different programs that we run across all of these, the 3 pillars. And the 4 programs are really based on expanding our network and building the network for our communities and our project partners. Flowing funds to both activists and organizations in a trust-based power-sharing way, amplifying their stories through storytelling, and we run multiple different storytelling series, and then, as Ruth said, our funder community of practice. So during this call, we'll hear a lot more about the Regenerative Capacity Development Program, which we've ran for 2.5 years and have granted over nearly $1 million to date for the 11 projects, and we continue to catalyze funding for these current projects that we're working with. This is kind of like a participatory grant giving program. It is a participatory grant giving program that we work on with our partners. So we have a co-design process, peer-to-peer monthly circles that we run with these projects. And then we have storytelling throughout, where we actually work with partners to train them and also amplify their voices through our newsletter, through social media channels, through our webinar series. And we'll dive into that a little bit more deeply during this call. We also have 2 different flow funds, one in East Africa with youth and women in permaculture, and then another flow fund based in Brazil with Brazilian indigenous women. And we're expanding this program to 2024. We've granted over $184,000 to date. And we're really working deeply with and connecting deeply to these individuals in these projects. We're actually looking to launch another flow fund in the US next year, soon to be 2024, let's say 2024. And then we also have a storytelling series where we work with the growing culture to highlight deep soil activists across the US. And we'll put a link to that into the chat as well. And then we have a storytelling series with our projects in East Africa, India, and the Amazon. And we also have a Humans of Regeneration webinar series that we run. And then finally, we have a funder community of practice where we're exploring different ways of power sharing. We share different resources. We host webinars together. We have in-person community gatherings with other funders in Brazil, the UK, and the US. And we're really looking to deepen our practice of power sharing. Ruth, did you want to add anything? Okay, good. I think the slide is for Ava.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Faith. So now we are going to devote the rest of our time together to speak about our Regenerative Capacity Development Program. And first, we'll give you a brief introduction, and later, as we've said, we'll have an interactive learning session, and we'll also have opportunities for Q&A.
Eva, speak up, please. Sorry, honey, speak up if you can.
Speak up, okay, great. As you know, today we're launching a new cohort, a new cycle of our RCD program. So we're very happy that you're here to support us. Thank you so much. In essence, the Regenerative Capacity Development Program is a partnership with a cohort of grassroots organizations. Together, we co-design a regenerative program that aims to impact food sovereignty, livelihoods, and ecology through land-based practices such as regenerative agriculture, agroforestry, permaculture, and water and soil interventions. The program strengthens organizational capacity, leadership skills, testing and fine-tuning of programs so that local organizations can grow into regional hubs. And these hubs, the idea is that we'll continue to train and become learning centers for other communities in the surrounding areas, sometimes regionally, sometimes even nationally. So as you've seen before, we have a theory of change. Same applies to our Regenerative Capacity Development Program. Here, the three main areas is the co-design process with the projects that we work with. We leave our grassroots organizations that we partner with really open to co-designing the programs that work for them based on their in-depth knowledge of the communities they serve and the lands where they're based. Then, as we've also spoken before, we connect the different partners that we work with in our cohort through peer-to-peer community learning centers so that they can network and resource each other. And also we network them with the larger movement. We network them with funders, with some of our people in our networks that are more in the global scale. And finally, we amplify their stories through our storytelling program so that they can also show their voices and have a platform for continuing to develop their own programs, as well as amplifying the general regenerative movement worldwide. Thank you. So in essence, these are the 4 phases of our work. Something we haven't talked about before much is how we find these grassroots organizations that we partner with. And obviously, since we have a lot of huge network of more than 400 partners that our prizes combined have worked with before, we have a great network to start with. So we start by sharing expressions of interest from these organizations that we've worked in the past through the Spring Prize, Fuller Challenge, Equator Prize. And then this is a simple form that they can fill out to show their expression of interest. And then we move on to some conversations, interviews that we are assisted with by our peer advisors. And these conversations are very much centered around our Regenerative Capacity Development Framework, which is basically a way to bring reflective questions to our peers, to our partners that we work with, our partners. And these questions are basically around, there's 10 different areas that we work with, but they're around organization, community, ecology. If you have any questions, we're happy to talk more about these. So finally, with the help of our peer advisors, our Regenerosity peer advisors, we do the initial selection of partners, and we move on to this co-design process that we do with the partners. At this point, we are still sort of getting to know each other. We're still almost like testing if we are a good fit for each other on both sides, whether it's the side of the grassroots organizations or our side. And we pay for 1 month of this process that co-designs the project. So that's one of the things that we actually resource organizations so that they have the time, they can feel like they have the time to spend co-designing this program, and it's not necessarily a repeat of something that they've done before. And then finally, we've talked about the learning and the inspiring, the peer-to-peer circles and storytelling, and we'll talk more about all of these in the next few minutes of our session.
Okay, we get some.
Yeah. And In this picture, we can see some of our partners, the way they have worked in their projects. Before here, you can see Earth Forever, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law working their land from barren hardpan to wonderful oasis food forest. And this is some of the things that we pride ourselves in, just seeing how projects just evolve from nothing to something that is so abundant and adorable to see. So this land has been a motivation in this community, and it's helping others to just learn from this demonstration and showing that it is possible. Next. We have different projects that are actually focused on different things in the Amazon, in East Africa, and in India. In Amazon, we have 2 projects that are focused on indigenous communities and some women. In East Africa, we have organizations that are focused on food forest, nutrition, conservation. And in India, we also have 4 projects that are focused on different things: indigenous people, marginalized groups, and also empowering women in achieving food forest and restoring their lands.
Thanks, Rugesa.
Next.
Sorry, spotlighting myself. Let me just change the slide. So you can see this is a summary slide of what we've done over the last 2.5 years with the projects that we've been working with. Our projects have been incredibly transformative over the last 2 years, just working with them. As you can see from the image that we showed that when Rugesa first started talking of Earth Forever, from barren land to a lush agroecology, regenerative forest, food forest at Earth Forever. And some of our projects that we wanted to highlight are Yise, Uganda, which has had a 100% increase in daily meals through the work of regenerative agriculture and 76% household income increase in the refugee in Naki Valley, where they work. And then also for Earth Forever, 50% of the household nutrition came from agroforestry after 2 years. And the videos that I just put into the chat really highlight a lot of this work and really identify the incredible work of our project partners. We are really a catalyst for these projects. And as Ruth said previously, the grassroots organizations that we're working with are the ones that we're uplifting. They're the ones that are doing this work. We're catalyzing this work and helping to create a platform for them. Another organization that we'd like to highlight is Tara Bharat Sang, who's had an increase in water availability and biodiversity and livelihoods over the last 2 years. So it's really incredible to see this change over time and see the outcomes. These are words on a page, but really feeling and seeing these projects through the videos and exploring the work through their websites and connecting directly to them is something that we're really passionate about. And we would love for you to do that yourselves, really, and would love to connect you directly with these projects and help to amplify their voices however you can. So we're about to launch our next program in 2024. This is a 2-year program, and we're looking to work with 8 grassroots organizations across Pan-Africa and Brazil. We have seed funding for this project and are looking to partner with others and are looking for further funding. We're also looking for help with promotion and social media, help with amplifying the voices of the projects that we're currently working with and have worked with previously, and the projects that we're already identifying to work with in 2024. We're looking to really continue the practices that we've done in the past. So working with regenerative agriculture projects, agroecology, agroforestry, water conservation, and value addition microenterprises. some of the impacts that have happened throughout time have really been, and this is all due to the really dedicated work of our partners at Ramwanja and Yisei and Tarambarat Sang, Earth Forever, Gardens for Health International, Navdanya, Yakum, and Institute Piagasu. They're all doing really incredible work. And we'll dive into how we actually start to co-develop and co-design with these project partners. But we'd love to continue this program and help to really set the stage for more deepening of this work and amplifying the voices of these projects. So we're looking to raise 1 million to 1.5 million over the next 2 years. And so if you are a funder or know of anybody that would be interested in this program, you can reach out to us. We'll put our information into the chat. We also have multiple different videos that we can share in the chat as well through our YouTube channel. And yeah, please continue to stay engaged and reach out to us. And I'll pass it over to Ruth to share more. And just to note that soon you will all be talking. We won't just be talking at you.
Yeah, it's a long presentation, but for me, this is the juiciest part and where we wanted to get to, which is like sharing a little bit of our learnings. I think also backing the first missions and meetings that we had with the GRC, from when we also had open meetings to share our methodology, to hear directly from our partners. Like, we've been really committed to making the work that we're doing open, and openly sharing the learnings. And then we wanted to do that today. So we want to do a little reflection on the 2.5 years of the first program that we ran with the Regenerative Capacity Development, and then hear from you and your questions and your feedback, and supporting us in making sure that we don't have blind spots. That's basically what we wanted to get out of this meeting and get out of this connection with you all here. So yeah, if we can move, I'll just, we'll go over the 3 main parts of our program that we have repeated many times. The project co-design, which is the beginning of the program. The peer learning circles that you heard a lot about, where we're using action learning to get people together to share their learnings. And the amplifying through storytelling, and what feels like a good way of telling those stories. So with the project co-design, this happens over a month, and it's actually funded. So we give a stipend to the groups to sit with us on, and it's not just us, it's also peer advisors, experienced permaculturists or regenerative practitioners from the areas where those projects are. So they're really also talking to their peers. And this is about resourcing the organizations and creating some reflection time, so they can explore what are their growing edges, where would they like to take their organization next, and design a 2-year program for them to learn and develop whilst also delivering some outcomes for the communities that they're part of. So they are developing their organization whilst also working in the community and supporting the community to develop, whether it's resilience or better livelihoods or biodiversity outcomes. Like we have a variety of outcomes. And I think that we're some really interested learnings from getting feedback and listening to the groups that went through this. I think first, having a stipend and the allotted time to actually sit down and reflect created some space for innovation, for them to think about maybe programs or ideas that they hadn't had before. We also really used an appreciative inquiry framework. So the interviews are much more about what is the wealth that's within those communities and those organizations, rather than what's the lack. So talking from that place of potential. we created a framework to kind of guide, but we heard some feedback that the framework doesn't feel, that the framework still is a little bit fragmented. So we're trying to bring a more regenerative perspective into the framework to make sure that we keep things as wholes. And then we also understood that sitting together, we could understand a lot more about the programs, but also I think the organizations felt more committed to achieving the goals that they were putting forward and committing themselves in this dialogue. And we influenced very little. It was really about creating space for some self-reflection. But we also found that the whole program, and this is something that we're changing the next cohort, is like the whole program was much more catalytic for organizations that were less established. So our idea is to really get young organizations or emerging organizations, and then that going through that process is really beneficial for them. For more established organizations, to be perfectly honest, is way better to put them in direct relationship with the funders, and for the funders to fund them directly, because they already know what they're doing. They already mature. And it's better for them to just get the funds rather than necessarily having to go through a developmental process. I think the developmental process is also interesting, but it was less, we felt it was less valuable to the established organizations. I think that was one of the key learnings. And when we're in the breakout groups, I'd love for us to explore this a little bit more. So please write down if you're having any thoughts now, or if this arose, like made a question arise in you, please write down the questions, because we will want that when we go to the breakout groups. Thank you.
And part of this kind of developmental process that Ruth was talking about, so once the organizations and the organization's members are welcomed into this kind of Regenerosity network and start to implement their projects that they've co-designed with us through this process that Ruth described, they're receiving funding for this. We do this monthly process of peer-to-peer learning circles, which was mostly an online space where people are welcomed into an online space for, we started off with 2 hours together, and sometimes this was even in person as well too. We tried some in-person ones as well. And in these spaces, this was a place for people to connect with one another, talk about challenges that have been going on with implementing their project and things that they've been learning, and they can really learn from one another. And like Ruth has been talking about, resource one another. And I think it was Aparna in the video earlier was saying that often implementing regenerative projects can be a bit lonely, because especially in contexts where you're surrounded by a lot of land degradation and conventional practices which are destroying landscapes, it can feel like you're alone in wanting to implement more ecologically regenerative and socially regenerative practices. So even just being in a space where people can motivate one another and connect with one another was really, really empowering, we found. Some learnings that we had, like Ruth said as well, the kind of difference that we noticed with younger organizations and those who've been established for more years, we actually found an interesting dynamic in the peer-to-peer learning circles where it was useful having a bit of a mix of experiences. And we also sometimes brought in different people with different skills in terms of, at one point people wanted to learn about biofertilizers and organic fertilizers, and we welcomed someone in with expertise on this. So welcoming in different skills was sometimes quite useful and needed. Always people from the region and the contexts where our partners are working. We noticed that this was such a useful experience for people that some of our partners actually replicated peer learning circles within their own communities to kind of ripple out these peer learning effects within their own communities. So that was really lovely to see. Something that we would maybe do different next time is to make sure that there's a lot of space for emergence. We noticed that when there was a very fixed structure, or there was a lot of operational work to do in these peer learning circles, that it limited the space for conversation and learning. Whereas actually having maybe a guiding theme for the peer learning circle, or a space for asking questions and getting reflection in a more organic way, seemed quite valuable for our partners. So by a few months in, we started separating anything that was operational to be a different space. So this was not a space to talk about, metrics or, things that they are doing day-to-day operationally, but more a space for conversation and learning and networking. And we also thought it was very important to find a way to capture the stories that were emerging in this space, because so much rich wisdom was being shared in these spaces that we found a few months in, oh my gosh, we really want to make sure that these are captured and shared more widely as well. So having a space to capture these was really useful. And also noticing that some of our members were quite close to one another, but hadn't necessarily visited one another in person. So giving space and encouraging those visits to one another in person as well was very rich. So yeah, like we said, we'd love to hear your reflections in the breakout room in a moment, but I think Ray is telling us a bit about storytelling.
Thank you, James. Throughout the Regenerative Capacity Development Program, we have been working with our partners to curate and share their stories, as well as their learnings, to drive more resources to their project and inspire the regenerative movement as a whole. And we've also partnered with the Growing Culture on a film series called Liberation Agriculture, based in the US, and documenting what regeneration cultivates in communities. And both of these threads of storytelling have been anchored in our desire to amplify those experiences and outcomes. And part of the learnings I suppose that we've come across is how do we work and support our grassroots partners to tell their own stories and to amplify their network. How do we highlight regenerative agricultural practices, as well as the social community impact? And finally, when documenting the project, as James mentioned just now, how do we capture the before and after to really get a visual representation of the work that's being done and the beautiful outcomes that are blossoming. A challenge that we face quite regularly is how can we improve, and this is something we'll touch in the reflection time. How do we cultivate more regenerative design and more regenerative inspiration behind the language we're using, and how do we incorporate the communities to be a part of that? And it's something that we've been working on since the beginning, but I think it's an evolving process. So I saw there's loads of very inspiring people in this group, so we'd love to hear from you. Yes, we have time for a reflection question, but shall we do ask our reflections first?
Sure, yeah, I think maybe we can do a short, if you just want to. People have been writing their reflections in the chat, but we're going to go into the breakout groups. And before, if you have any questions or anything that you want to comment, feel free to, yeah.
Cool. Okay, so just to premise the breakout groups, we've got 3 groups which everyone can choose where they'd like to go to. We'd love to hear from you, depending on which question you're most drawn to. In the program co-design group, Wigesa will be hosting you, and the question will be, how might we design this phase better, centering the needs of our partners and their communities? If you want to hop into the peer-to-peer circles group, the question will be, how can we amplify peer learning and more connection amongst our partners and wider stakeholders? And if you'd like to, that will be with James. If you'd like to join me in the storytelling group, how might we embed nature-inspired and reciprocal approaches in language and storytelling? But as for the reflections, we'd love to, come to that afterwards.
Ray, I'll just go through what we're going to do in the breakout group. So this idea of like resourcing regenerosity, we know that we try to give you as much context as possible, but we know that it's going to be hard, to have all the level of detail. So what we want is support in making sure that we have no blind spots. So what we hope to get from you in the breakout groups is please ask us questions. Please challenge, make sure that what we're doing is coming from a regenerative paradigm. So you're helping us see maybe there is language that is colonial. Maybe we're coming at this from, a more transactional perspective. Maybe we haven't thought about this. Maybe we're not being inclusive enough. I mean, we don't want necessarily judgment, but we want questions. Like, ask us the right questions that would help us think about this program in new ways, maybe in ways we haven't thought before, or help us overcome any blind spots. So that's what we're asking from our community, is how can you resource us so we can do this better for next year? And then also, how can you continue to support us, whether it's funding or connections or platforming or interest or even direct connections with our partners? That would be wonderful. So let's go into the big breakout groups, and please, give us your reflections and your questions to help us do this better.
Love to hear from you all and hear more voices in the room. We've talked at you for nearly an hour, so happy to hear your voices now. So I think go for
Faith,
it.
can I just answer a question that we didn't have time to answer in our to kick off the Q&A?
Yeah.
I think it was a question about what is it like working in 3 different places, and how do we keep a pulse in what's happening on the ground? And I think just to say that we are not doing work in the communities. Our partners are. We are supporting the programs and bringing our partners together in the peer learning circles that happen every month, so they can share their stories and then share their learnings. And then we have a local coordinator. So Wegesa, you can speak more about your role as the local coordinator. Like, what did you do?
Oh, thank you so much, Ruth. We, like Ruth had explained in our breakout rooms, that the organizations that were selected were initially vetted by Spring Prize, by BFI, and by
Creator Prize.
Creator Prize. We came here to just amplify their work, probably just to make sure that their needs that they have brought on board are met. The communities they are working in have needs, and they are focusing on these needs. They have different needs. And what we have here is that we tell them, okay, what's your first need that you think you can tackle within a 2-year period with your community that can help you move to the next level? And they say, this can be this, or this can be this and this. And so we create priorities. We ask them to create priorities and see which one, how to make steps moving from one stage to another as they grow. And therefore, we start with the first priority steps that they need to do. If they don't have capacity, we build capacity. If they don't have, if they want trainings, we do those trainings. They don't have startup kits for the community, buying seeds and stuff. We will focus on the needs that the community has to grow the project. So those are the steps that we take. And they are the leading, because they are connected to the communities, and therefore they are listening to the communities, and they know what the communities need and lack, and that's where we're going to come in to fund.
And then just to say that we are funding that work in the landscape. We are not training the programs. They are training each other, and they're training the community. So I'll give you an example. Like TBS, Tarun Barasang, is a very established project in India working on large-scale water restoration, really pioneers of landscape level water design. What they wanted to grow is that they do everything with pen and paper. So they're not collecting any data in any way that is more systemic, that they can actually work on that analysis. So that's the capacity that they want to build. But they did that, not like, okay, we're going to fund for you to get some training on software. They found a local solution. They worked with a software provider while developing water resilience in 5 communities over 2 years. So it's that idea that we are supporting them to learn whatever they want to grow while doing the program. So you know, at the end of the program, they had the more software capabilities to collect data, but you also had water resilience in 5 new communities, right? So I think that's the someone else that already working with women and nutrition. They had a regenerative demo site, and they wanted to improve that demonstration site and also get more training regenerative agriculture. So, you know, they did that aspect. As I said, Timbuktu Collective, amazing program, but they wanted some more support with value adding, to do value adding for the products coming from regenerative agriculture. And we funded the regenerative agriculture plus a piece for value addition. And then remember that all those projects are coming together to exchange with each other and also co-learn. And Rick had another question. Rick, I have that. I love that question. One of the partners, they actually started doing peer learning circles in their community. So they were just using, you know, the same methodology and get the community together to share learnings. But yeah, it would be lovely. We also thought, should we just do peer learning as a separate program? Because it felt so valuable. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe this is something you can help co-create with us. The GRC for me is that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we should give a little bit of a backstory to the work that we've done with the GRC. Do you want me to talk about it, or do you want to talk about it, Ruth?
No, go for it.
So Regenerosity actually launched with a conversation with David Hodgson, who started the Global Regenerative Collab. I see David Witzel here as well. Hey, David. So we wanted to actually have this new launch of our program for 2024 with the GRC. We feel like we're family. We're definitely interrelated in terms of the fact that we love the work of the GRC. It's an incredible group that has, I don't know, is it 500 community members, David?
Well, the mailing list is so well over 1,000 now. People come and go.
So the GRC actually started when Ruth, Amanda, and I had a conversation with David Hodgson in New York at the climate talks. And he was like, I wanted to start a network of change makers. And it was really incredible to see. It is really incredible to see what has become of the GRC. And, you know, that's 4 years in the making now. So just, yeah, so much praise for the work that the GRC is doing and for our partnerships. And all of our partners are members of the GRC, our project partners. You see Ben Ricky on this call. I don't know if he's still here. Jean-Pierre, Timbuktu Collective, Earth Forever, they're all part of the GRC. So it's very incredible.
And also everything that we do, like all these webinars, we always invite our partners, you know, it's like we're trying to do this as openly as possible. Yeah. I was just writing in the chat that for me, I think a key learning has been that funded time for reflection and sharing learning and connectivity and platforming really supports programs to grow in a way that just direct funding does not. I mean, direct funding is amazing. And as we said, we're also putting projects in front of lots of other funders for direct funders, that like direct funding, that is absolutely crucial. But like the time to sit down and listen to each other and reflect, and that time being paid as part of the program and sharing learning, I think for me has been the kind of the layer that we added to the work that we're doing.
Mm-hmm. And on the note of reflection, we really wanted to give a bit of time for your reflections as well to all of those who have joined us. So I think we've got about 10 minutes or so to or maybe 5 to 10 minutes. If there's anything that you wanted to ask us or anything that you've noticed to help us reflect as we continue to evolve this program into the next round, we'd love to welcome your reflections and your questions that can really help us think. So please feel free to put up your hands or pop it in the chat. We'd love to hear your voices if you want to raise your hand and ask questions. And while you're doing that, like Faith said earlier, we are launching this new phase of the program. So we're also looking for partners to help fund this work. So if there's anyone that you would like to introduce us to or think we should welcome into this space in terms of funding partners, we'd love to hear your thoughts too. So please feel free to share any ideas on that front as well.
Keith, I just want to speak to what you said, because this is something we have discussed so many times. We even discussed that perhaps we shouldn't get the shortlisted groups. We should get the groups that didn't make the shortlist, because then we're really evolving capacity. Because our whole thing was, how do we collectively really help evolve the capacity of the regenerative movement, right? So yeah, we haven't figured that out. I think it's we haven't figured out how to do a fair process, but we also thought of that maybe getting nominations from other funders or nominations from the networks. Yeah, but yeah, it's a good question. We need to, with abundant funding.
My experience in the transition movement was that the early adopters tend to have the most capacity for whatever reason, and then they tend to get the attention, and so they increase their capacity and their capability. And if anything, the gap can kind of grow rather than be reduced. And I've always been really dubious of the kind of theory of change around having beacons of excellence and that somehow spreading, because I haven't seen much evidence of that actually happening in practice. So it feels like it's a perpetual problem. I'm not expecting that you would have solved it, but I suppose one thing to do would be to set up something where you were asking people on the ground to put you in touch with communities that were struggling rather than communities that were already succeeding. I don't know.
I think there's this in-between place as well, Peter, just in terms of there are other groups like Abundant Earth that works with really, really young organizations or young individuals that are working on launching their organization or their work into the world, and they may not be able to take as much resources. I don't know that's not really explained the way I want to, but they can take a certain amount of resources versus the kind of what do we call them, teenager organization, or if we're talking about life cycle of an individual versus a life cycle of an organization. But there's a stage of an organization where they can take on more resources and more capacity building support. And so I think really that's been our focus for the last 2.5 years, but definitely that is needed. It's so needed, those young organizations, and identifying them and supporting them that's part of the cycle. It is part of the cycle.
That's a really great thing to reflect. And maybe what we can do in the next cohort is add 1 or 2 organizations that are maybe struggling. We did say that we want organizations that are in the death valley of the nonprofit, like startups. We have this death valley that if they don't have some funding and some support, all the work that they've done will get lost because they just, so we are, and the Flow Fund has been super interesting because the Flow Fund is $3,000, and Bemeriki, I don't know if you can open your microphone. Bemeriki was one of our flow funders. Wegesa was one of our flow funders, and Wegesa talk about what she did with $3,000, and now we managed to get $40,000 for Alice because we were like, oh my God, look at this person, and then really, how do we, support her? Wegesa, I don't know if you want to share a little bit about the East African Flow Fund.
Yeah, the East African Flow Fund has actually trained a lot of trainers of trainers, especially in kitchen gardens and regenerative agriculture in different parts of Kenya, in different communities with different challenges. And what we did is that those beneficiaries actually had different groups with different visions. There are those who are lacking like water for their urban areas with small farms, so they lack like water for irrigation. Also things like container gardening and small pieces of land that actually can produce mighty. Alice was one of us, and she has this hillside organic garden that is just on a 1/4 acre that is producing a lot of food for her family and to feed her family of 8 and the neighborhood sometimes come in and just pick food. So she has chickens, she has rabbits, she has fish on that small piece of property, and we're using that as a demonstration to show that however small your piece of land could be, it can still produce food, and you don't have to buy everything from the groceries. So that's what we are bringing into the mindset of the people, and it's really helping a lot to see that urban people can grow food in small spaces and save. So the money that comes through Flow Fund helps these people acquire, like for example, containers if they are in urban settings, watering cans and tanks to store water for irrigation during the time when there's no rain, so that their gardens flourish. And we have also in arid areas where we are doing kitchen gardens for arid communities that do not have totally enough rain, but they can use we can use a lot of mulching and use gardens that store water, like raised and sunken beds, and that's collecting a lot of water and moist to keep in the land. So it's done a lot of amazing things with only 3,000 for our community. Thank you. And mushroom, and Bemeriki did a lot of mushroom training for especially income generation and also for malnutrition communities in the refugee camps in Tanzania and Uganda.
Yeah, so I think that's that's it. Like the Flow Fund is the seed capital to see the programs, and then the ones that are doing really well, we are doing our best to get further funding. But yeah, I think that feedback was great, Pete. We should think of putting because then we can really prove the the methodology of peer learning and mutual aid and platforming and connectivity as key